Welcome back. Another episode in DisruptEd. Today we have an interesting session, a bit of a twist to the previous sessions. Today we have an entrepreneur that is also a parent, whereby we are trying to discuss what is a desired education experience for a potential entrepreneur in the future. Thank you very much, Samer Hamadeh, for joining me today.
Thank you for
Such an
having
honor.
me. Mine too.
I was pleasantly surprised to know that you are also blessing us with one of your daughters here at the school.
Yeah, my only daughter. Yeah. No,
Okay,
she's starting next year.
Amazing. What an impressive history. What an impressive journey of entrepreneurship. I'd like, if you don't mind, to sharing some of that with the audience. And I would love if you can actually map it with your education experience also. So, where did you start? How did it work out for you up till today?
Where do I start? I have to go very far back without giving up my age too much. Believe it or not, the first time I wanted to develop something or create something or start a business, I was maybe, I want to say 15 years old, which was a very random age because, it was basketball and video games at the time. And I wanted to throw a music festival because I used to go to summers in the mountains where my family's from in Lebanon, and it was very boring for me the first couple of years. So I thought, what could I do something that I would like? And then by, association, friends of mine that used to come visit or people living in the town, in the city would like. And I threw a music festival. I took $1,000 from my dad, and that was my budget. I had to put together a festival. We pulled it off. I don't know how we did it, but we did it. Obviously, all my friends helped for free. No one made money. I never paid my dad back, but that's an ROI conversation for another time. So I think at that point, I realized that I'm good at putting things together, not so good at executing things, in the sense that I have a vision or an idea for something, and I really enjoy that process, but the operational part, I have zero interest in. And this is at 15, so it was a very big realization. And in fact, before I went to college, I had an argument with my dad the week or 2 weeks before about what I wanted to study, because I was going into a freshman year, so I hadn't decided on a major yet, and he's a business graduate. He's like, go do business. My mom did political science. They do political science. My family's in politics in Lebanon, so he's like, at least there's a future. I had no interest in it whatsoever. My extended family.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a great business, but not for me. So my thought process then, which I think defined the last 25 years of my life at 17 or 18, 17, my freshman year, is I didn't care what I did, whether it's music festivals or something in tech or write a book or be a tennis coach, whatever it was, all I cared about was what I do in my time. So as long as I have control over my time, and I realized in college that's what I loved university, because of that, like I could pick my courses, and if I missed a class, it's not the end of the world, and if I wanted to go play a sport instead of go. So I think that dictated what my very short career as a corporate employee at Impact, at BBDO 20 years ago. I quit after 9 months, I couldn't do it. And after that, I had to be on my own. I was unemployable. So I think that realization early came completely by accident because I was bored one summer and I wanted to have a music festival. But I think ultimately, the environment I was in was very against me thinking this way. Because everyone was like, get a degree, you get a job in that field, and thank you very much. You work until you retire. And that made me a little bit uneasy. So I think that kind of alienation or that kind of boundaries or borders or walls for me became like a challenge. So I think that's what really cracked it for me. And then I came to Dubai.
And when was that?
Almost exactly 20 years ago.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so came here, no idea what to do, and I just kind of figured it out. But Dubai pushes you. This is something we should talk about. And that's something most people don't realize.
Okay. And so you landed in Dubai?
Landed in Dubai, no job, nothing. I was supposed to go to New York to finish my master's.
Okay.
My dad said...
And you did your bachelor's in which field?
English literature and language.
Interesting.
I started off in graphic design, realized I like computers, but I can't draw to save my life. I didn't end up continuing the application. I went to business school, got into business school. All my professors were part-timers, couldn't go see anyone in office hours. And I thought, again, because of the conditioning, if I want to get a master's in the future, I need recommendations from someone who's known me for a couple of years. All these teachers are part-time. How am I going to find these people?
Okay.
I took an elective in English, at an English class, creative writing, fell in love with the chairman of the department, amazing guy. And like, I'm like, this is, like, I want to work with this guy. It was more about him and his department that he built. His daughter was in my class, and it was an incredible experience doing English. And then, obviously, my dad not very happy about it. He's like, what are you going to do, be a teacher? I said, yeah, great. I'd love to be a teacher if there's money. And then he's like, okay, fine, you'll be a teacher. So then in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to be a teacher. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out.
You know what, since you are on that,
what?
I'm actually publishing a book this weekend.
This weekend?
Yes.
Oh.
A novel.
Is this your first novel?
It's my first novel, yes.
It
took me 10 years to write.
But you did it. I mean, some people, people start and never finish. So. Yeah, but look, there's no right answer, I think, at that age. We were just talking about your predicament right now, right? So I think I got lucky in some instances. The fact that I went to a very difficult school in Lebanon after I moved there from Saudi, where I went to a very open-minded American school to a very closed-off, Lebanese system. I don't know if I can say the school, but it made me not like school. And I mean, they have branches around the world. And it's incredible how a school has such an impact on you. It could be extremely positive, extremely negative, but either way, I think you walk away with something. So the question is, what are the odds of walking away with the bug that makes you want to start your own business, or at least attempt? So I think that's what you're trying to do here, which is why I got excited and I brought my daughter and we did a tour and we fell in love with the school and the program and what you're building. And I think you're answering a very old question of mine, which is, what's the future of education? And I think that in itself, having a school that's an entrepreneur, the school is an entrepreneur, not just you.
Okay, good.
Right? Your whole organization
behaves
like
the whole idea. Yeah.
And that's incredible. I mean, so.
I understand you spent some time in Saudi.
I grew up in Saudi.
Okay.
I left when I was 14.
Okay, and you were in the education system there? Was it
the American school?
The American school. Okay.
It was the American school in Riyadh, which is actually an incredible school.
Okay.
And I left to Lebanon, and it was a complete. You'd think in Lebanon we'd be more open-minded in school. It was the complete opposite.
So you went to university, or you back to school?
To school. I did the last 2 years of school, or 3 years, and then university.
Okay.
So 8 years in Lebanon. Then I moved here.
And how do you characterize your experiences, the different experiences you had?
Well, Saudi, again, it was an American school, so it was more general knowledge and understanding the world, and more about personal skills and conversational skills rather than books.
Okay.
When I moved to Lebanon, I went to school with long hair and shorts, and you can't even wear that.
Okay.
I was 14 years old. What am I supposed to wear? So that was the first kind of clash for me. I was really into music. No one really listened to music. Everything was math and science. Arabic was an alien language to me, although we're Lebanese, but we never really spoke that much Arabic at home. So I think the biggest shock for me was how different the education was.
Okay.
Like how strict schools can be, and how memorizing parts of a book constitutes education.
Okay.
You're supposed to be learning something.
Okay.
How can you learn if you're just memorizing pages for one test? So the whole thing was very alien to me. And keep in mind, I came from a school that I had a class called speech exploratory. You just sat around and talked. And I used to get maybe 115%.
Okay.
That's one thing I know how to do. So I find it incredible how everything around us has evolved, and education is so slow to evolve. Yeah. We're still teaching things that are ancient. I mean, again, in literature, you learn or you read authors that come from the countries, and this is going to sound a bit politically polarizing, but countries that effectively won wars. So the countries that won wars throughout history, their authors and their poets became the canon for the English literature, if you want. It's never. So in university, that changes. In school, you're learning what the French system or the American system considers literature.
Okay.
There's thousands of writers in history that people should read about, but you never get a chance because they were persona non grata.
Okay, got it.
Or maybe at some point they were communists, so you weren't allowed to read. What I'm trying to say is all these things matter, and we don't think about it. It's like going to a school and the principal believes in one thing, and everyone has to believe this one thing. So if you don't have the tools to open your mind a little bit or be a bit curious and ask questions,
you can really fall in a box.
Exactly, you'll be in that box, and that's all you know.
So now you are in Dubai.
Now
you have no plan. 20 years ago, you just landed here.
Yep.
Then the craze start with all of those amazing ventures you've built.
Well, so I got a job in advertising, 2 jobs. The first one I said no to go work on a movie called Syriana, and I was a production assistant. So I got coffee and I ran with the goats, and I'm not even kidding. Like, this is, people don't believe me, but I legit worked on that movie. And I said no to a job that paid me triple what BBDO paid me.
So you actually worked on Syrian?
Yeah, I worked on. I was a production assistant. On
Okay,
so it was an incredible experience. It was my first experience in Dubai, with the UAE in general, because we shot in Sharjah, we shot in the desert, and to put things into perspective, the day my brother picked me up from the airport, he took me straight to Emirates Towers. So my first experience of Dubai was, still till today, my favorite buildings in the whole world, was Emirates Towers. And then working on a movie with Warner Brothers and George Clooney and Matt Damon. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, when you're 24 years old and that's what you're doing, it's a pretty big, it's a substantial experience to have. And there's no way I would have gotten that anywhere in the world. Okay. The US would have been impossible. Europe would have been a non-existent conversation. Unions and drama and whatever. So that was my first experience in Dubai. So you can imagine how in love I was with the city, that in 6 weeks opened a tremendous amount of doors for me. And I thank my dad for that, because he's the one who told me to come here and not New York. He's like, the future is here. New York's always going to be there. You can go for vacation. If you go, you won't come back. So then I got a job at an ad agency, and I don't think I was really serious about it. Even in my interviews with the CEO of the agency, he's like, this is a thing I rarely talk about, but it's actually a true story. He's like, what's your biggest weakness? And I had no experience before. I said, honestly, probably ballroom dancing. So, I mean, if this is the answer you're giving the CEO, they should have thought this guy's not going to stick around. And my boss at the time, the big boss of the department, he told me, he's like, you're not going to stick around. This is not for you. And he was right. 6 months later, I had to leave. And the reason I left isn't because I didn't like it. I loved the culture in the agency. And it was really interesting working on projects like Dubai Holding, meeting people like Mohammed Al-Gargawi, His Excellency, and sitting up and seeing what Dubai Holding were doing in Dubai and all the crazy projects that were coming up. I mean, when you're exposed to that, you start thinking, if the leadership of the city are thinking this way and taking humongous risks and humongous, challenges in front of them, if they're able to do that, and they're telling you they're doing it, and they're asking you to help them do it, which means Dubai feeds off other entrepreneurs, right, at the end of the day. The city runs like a company. It doesn't run like a city. It doesn't run like a government institute. So in my mind, I'm like, if they're doing it, they're telling us, maybe you guys should do it too. But from almost everyone that worked at that agency, I think only 2 or 3 people left and set up their own thing. So I started my first company, I was 25 years old. Interesting. And I mean, I didn't really start it. It was an existing company, and I took a sister company, and I did corporate events. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part for me is that I was able to do that at 25 with little to no money or experience. So I'm not a trust fund kid that came in and just wrote a check and rented an office and went and got business. I just thought, if I'm going to try something, now's the time to do it. Because what's the point of spending 10 years at a job if you know you're probably going to leave anyway? Just cut your losses. Worst case, it doesn't go back. There'll be jobs waiting at some point in time. Dubai was growing, the city was growing, opportunities were everywhere. But I think I got really lucky, honestly, with the partners that I had for the first business, with the opportunities. Obviously, I brought a lot of business to the agency, but also to my events agency. But it's Dubai also. Like, the city, it gives you an itch to do your own thing. I think if people realize how easy it is to get started here, a lot more people would do it. And I think a lot of people, I'm not saying people should just leave their jobs and go start companies, but I always thought, what's the worst that could happen? If it doesn't work out, I'll figure something else out. So I don't think my education gave me that mentality.
So I want to actually arrive to that question.
Yeah.
But before doing so, you have developed so many things after that. Would you share with us what happened?
Yeah, so it started with corporate events purely because I thought I saw an opportunity in the market. It wasn't because I love events or it's my dream or anything. I'm curiously passionate, let's put it that way. So if I get into a subject, my passion goes into discovering stuff about it. It's not that I loved it. I just felt there was a need in the market. There weren't that many agencies that were trying to do what I wanted to do with creative corporate events. Everything was pretty cookie cutter, hotel ballroom, buffet, and then you leave. I wanted to do something different. So that's why I always refer to myself as an opportunist, not an entrepreneur. Yes, by definition, I am an entrepreneur. That's what I do day to day. But the reality is, I feel like I would do anything as long as I felt there's an opportunity there. Or I would bring opportunities to the right people, even if I can't be involved. That's what I like to do. So With events, it was an easy thing. It was a huge market. I knew the kind of budgets that were being spent on events. I was a creative guy. I'm like, I could do this. And I did for a couple of years. This is the same company that owned the Dubai Jazz Festival. So I had an amazing team with me. I wasn't by myself trying to make it work. I mean, I learned everything from them very quickly. And then from there, it just developed to other things, opened a couple of restaurants, opened a couple of bars, opened a couple of nightclubs. But everything I did was disruptive for the industry.
So would you share some of those disruptions? How did they be disruptive? And how do you actually come up with the disrupting angle?
I'll give you on the corporate events angle first. Something super random, and anyone that was around those days may have seen this live in person. But Whiskas were my client, Whiskas and Pedigree, which are cat and dog food brands. I mean, we have dogs at home, my wife and I. So we always loved animals. And so they came to me with a brief. They want to push adoption for animals. That was the brief. The brief is, we want to be seen as the brands that are pushing people to adopt and not buy animals. So instead of going and doing what the agency before me had done for several years, which is put a couple of banners and TV screens and whatever, I built a living room in Mall of the Emirates in front of Virgin Megastore, and one in Wafi at the time, and I think Burjuman as well. We did a road show. I built an actual living room, and I brought some cats into the living room to sit with people, and we hired models to spend the day in the living room as if they're at home, to show people what the cat would do or your animal would do in your house while you're sitting there. So for me, that's how my brain worked. Like, I could do the same thing everyone else has done. I make less money by doing things this way because the budgets don't change, but at least from a disruption perspective, walking into a mall and seeing a living room with animals in it, I don't think anyone had seen it before. I mean, this was, I think till now, I don't think I've seen it happen in a shopping mall. So that was one thing in terms of events. In terms of nightlife and hospitality, everyone was doing the same thing in the city because they were trying to attract a certain audience in Dubai. I wanted to attract people like me. For example, I like 80s music. So I wanted to open a bar or a club that played 80s music. It wasn't about the drinking or the dancing. It was more about listening to the music that, creates that sense of nostalgia. And we all have it. It's one of the few things which I think is universal. Every single human being on the planet has nostalgia. And most of the time, again, I'm not a scientist, but from what I've read over the years, it's for an era that we romanticize, that may not have been as amazing as we think it was.
Yeah.
But because of movies, because of growing up in certain times, you fantasized about stuff. So if I can recreate that fantasy in a venue, then I think I might have a success. And I did that several times. And it was always, I say, these are nightlife experiences for nonconformists. People that wanted to wear sneakers and jeans and a t-shirt, but were wearing a Patek. You don't have to get super dressed up So that was the disruption for me, is creating a space for everyone to feel welcome, everyone to feel safe, everyone to listen to the music that they normally wouldn't find in Dubai, or any city, by the way. It's not just, Dubai is not an exception to the rule, in general. Because nightlife follows a trend. So I went against the trend, which is going backwards.
Okay.
It was a huge gamble, but it paid off. I mean, it did incredibly well. Republic, Stereo Arcade. I built an arcade. People used to come in, play video games from the 80s and the 70s, then go, dance in a little bit, listen to Depeche Mode and INXS and Pet Shop Boys and Bon Jovi, and things that you wouldn't normally imagine listening to at a nightlife venue. So that's how that disruption kind of happened. Again, in a city that was mostly luxury and stuff like that. I went against that completely. So I thought, I want people who will come spend a lot of money, but don't feel the need to show it. And I think that was a disruption in terms of nightlife. And then after that, you grow up, you have kids, you get out of these things. So
and what are you busy with nowadays?
So, I did a few things after that, a bunch of restaurants as well, developed my own concept, helped some friends launch their concept. And I realized in that process that I'm better, because I'm not an operator, I'm a very bad operator.
We share that, by the way. Okay.
For me, there you go. So you understand my pains. So I realized that I like developing. I like looking for opportunities and finding them, locking them in, and developing the opportunity. But tell me to come run the opportunity, I have less than zero interest. Even if you tell me it's very profitable, I'd rather have someone who has skin in the game, a vested interest in running the business, run the business, because they'll know more than me. Even if I were to learn from them, I'm not going to learn at the pace that the business requires. But most importantly, I don't think we become successful as individuals unless we have people around us who also want to be a part of that success or share in the success. It's very difficult. Unless you're a tennis player or a solo musician, It's very difficult to do things just on your own. We're not, picked from a tree and thrown on an island. You need people around you. So the biggest part of the experience for me has been finding the right people, the right partners, whether from a fundraising side or from a legal side or an advice side or the board of directors side, but mostly the operational side, because that's what makes or breaks, as I'm sure you know, any business, right? So
you're just touching at it's so funny how similar we are, actually.
yeah,
You're just touching on a very sensitive element that I'm pushing in what I hope is the offering of citizens in the school, which is when asked, what is it that you want to do with the school? What is your objective out of it? I always say I want to be able to help graduate entrepreneurial teams. Okay, which is very different than graduating entrepreneurs.
yes,
Because it's never a single individual. It's always teams.
always.
Okay, so and educational experiences, most educational experiences focus on the individual.
Only on the individual.
Only on the
Only.
individual. And even if you probably have seen some of these when you're in school and they give you like a team project.
It's always one person who does all the work.
Exactly. It's the measurement of progress, measurement of success of a project. I do see that there's quite a gap still in how education system trains teams rather than training individuals, engaging their performance accordingly. So you are touching on a very interesting point. I want to ask you about failure.
Failure.
Of the ventures and of the efforts, percentage-wise, roughly.
Failures versus successes, probably 70% failures, 30% successes.
Good.
But and not just financial, like from multiple angles, right? It's not
Okay.
always a financial failure or a success. Because sometimes you could be very successful financially, but you ruin your life in the process.
Got it.
Correct? So that's, for me, is a failure.
And would you give me an example of that?
I always say, at least me personally, because I started off very young with this stuff, very young, compared to a lot of my friends who started off later. That's the only litmus test that I have is with people that are around me. I think I wasn't mature enough to realize the importance of certain things that I've realized now, like at my age. I'm 44 in December, so it took me a while to get to a point where I'm like, this is almost as important as the other thing. So I think I get lost in the launch of a project. I get so caught up to launch it and make it incredibly huge, as much as possible, obviously within reason and within, if you want to call it luck sometimes. I don't focus too much on long-term planning. And that's a big failure for me in general, like in terms of a business. That's one that I could say. So I've had a few scenarios where maybe if I had been a bit more strategic, things could have lasted, businesses could have lasted longer. One. Two, we fall into the trap of comfort. When you get comfortable with something, I feel like you might stop trying. So I'm not saying I necessarily got comfortable in all my projects, but certainly some of them felt like this would be forever, which was very far from the truth. The reality is, even the best businesses can fail, and even the worst businesses can be resurrected. There's no, I think, single answer.
So success is never permanent.
No, it's not possible because success means different things at different times.
Yes.
Launching a business is a success. You launch it successfully. Maintaining the business can be considered a success. But if while you're maintaining the business, you don't have a team that's growing with you, that cares about the success of the business, you might fail overnight. You fall off a cliff and it's over. There's no support, right? So I think the failure for me has been not seeing signs that I should have seen, probably in some businesses, that even if I couldn't have saved them, at least I could have maybe cut my losses or our losses as a group or several groups or whatever it was, and maybe being too optimistic about markets or market conditions in certain industries, thinking that it would always be like this. Because, I have friends in high places in finance who said, everything's going here. And they were completely off. Just to show you how little we know. COVID's the best example of how little we know about anything. No one would have expected how the world changed after 2020 to this level, right? It just goes to show you that nobody knows. There's poly-market. People go bet on outcomes of elections. And if you believe what people are betting on, you could predict the future. But reality is you can't really predict what's going to happen. You have to create a system, I think, that saves you from failure for that period of time, because you're going to keep getting challenged. I mean, how many times did you get challenged with the concept or the school? Honestly, I mean, I can't even imagine how difficult it must have been to say, like, we're going to do this completely different.
I started building it in December 2019.
Oh, wow.
It's
Good
probably
timing.
the worst time.
Worst possible time.
But, you know, Corona has changed me drastically. And there was a question that I used to be asked all the time by my friends. Is that, Adil, why aren't you focused? Why are you into so many fields? I never really knew how to answer them.
It's a difficult question to answer.
Okay, it's because you get to those schools of thoughts. It's like, no, you know, leave everything and just focus and be really good at one thing. That went totally against my nature.
Yeah, that's the old school of thought.
I don't know. I actually didn't know, yeah? So by then, what happened was Corona hit. A lot of my friends got super rich. A lot of them went to jail.
Yeah, two opposite polar.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was stable, still growing.
Because you had multiple ventures.
Good successes, Actually, Corona has doubled the value of one of my businesses, which I sold and was able to then build the whole school on my own.
That's incredible.
Which is the best thing that ever happened to me, because only 2 or 3 years after Corona, or after the beginning of Corona, where I realized that education was hardly affected as an industry. People wanted their kids to go back to school
as soon as possible,
as possible, because they wanted to go back to work.
Yeah, of course.
And there was a lot of elements missing in the bringing up of kids without being physically there in a space
restricted,
whereby they interact and so on and so forth. So yeah. Before I get into how education does really positively impact the life of learners, I want to hear from you after 20 years of this journey of an entrepreneurship. How do you see life, and what would be your strategy as an individual or as a family moving forward?
It's a difficult question, but a complicated one, but also very simple for me. I think you have to realize very quickly what matters to you the most. And then build some kind of an existence, so I won't call it a life, because we exist, I think, in moments, right? That gets you to that goal. So this whole thinking 5 years ahead and 10 years ahead, I'm never going to be that person, and I was never that person. And I don't know how anyone can be that person. You have to be ready to change overnight, or else you're out. It's just the reality of the world we live in today. I think for me, personally, or at least now us as a family, we've been married for 7.5 years now. My daughter's 4. So before then, my life was very different. So I look at it now as stages. I don't look at it as one long stretch. In my 20s, I had certain priorities. I wanted to travel. So as long as I saw as much of the world as possible, living in Dubai, having Emirates Airline, such an easy place to live for people that want to travel, I wanted to take advantage of it. Something you can't always do, even if you have money. What you don't have is time. So I think my biggest realization that allows me to come here on a Monday at noon and shoot a podcast with you is the fact that I own my time. That was my only objective that has sustained me or kept me going in the last 20 years, is I don't care what I do. Because some businesses will do well regardless of whether I like it or not, and some will not do well, whether I try or not. It's just, sometimes really some businesses cannot, it just doesn't fit with you, with what you're trying to do. So if I have very little control over the economy, very little control of people's habits, I'm not trying to create a new industry, why am I stressing about things that I have zero control over? Let me focus on what I do have control over, which is how I use my time. So if I have 4 hours of focus a day, how can I use those 4 hours to make the most amount of money so I can continue to only have to do 4 hours a day? If I'm a scientist working in a lab and I'm working towards a cure for something, that's a different story. If I'm a pilot, it's a different story. If you're a doctor, you're an engineer, and you have an industry-specific career path, khalas. If you're a lawyer, as amazing as you are as a person, my brother-in-law and father-in-law are both lawyers. If you're not in the office, you're not making money. If you're a doctor and you're not in your clinic, you're not making money. That's why for me it was really critical, whatever I did, it had to be a business that could sustain me owning my time, regardless of what that business was. You want me to do a trading company? You want me to do a tech company? You want me to do a small, set up a small fund and do VCs? I'll do whatever I have to do. So I think the thing I said to my wife from day one is, I'm like, listen, some days I'm up here, some days I'm down here. You need to be okay with this from the beginning, or else it's very difficult. Obviously, she has her own business as well, so that helps a lot. And but my point here is, I think that was the kind of gel that keeps us sane. Is that as long as the time we have a day, or the hours in the day that we do want to work, are enough to keep us going, that's it.
I always say, it's actually saying it differently.
Yeah.
Say, freedom, true freedom as an entrepreneur, in my opinion, for me as Adil, and the thing that I love, despite all the businesses that I run and I'm involved with, but I can disappear today.
And it wouldn't affect the business.
And that's freedom.
Exactly.
Things might slow up a bit here and there, but it won't really be affected. And that's true freedom. Like, I can decide, actually, you know what, I have to travel tomorrow, or I just want to, take a day off. I can't do that, and I would, things would still go on, which is amazing.
That's how you build generational wealth. By being in industries that don't care what you like or don't like, or what you do or don't do. It shouldn't be living or dying based on your time and because how can you handle it? It's impossible to do a million things at the same time.
So if we go back after all of these years of successes and failures and evolving a family now, how could your education experience have readied you better? How would you have loved
school?
Yeah. What kind of a school would have made you go through the journey of 20 years in a more relaxed fashion, or in a more prepared fashion?
You should ask my wife what she says to me when I talk about citizens, although she's like, you want to go there. Sounds like it.
Good.
Honestly, for me, when we did the orientation, we did a tour around the school. I mean, I had only read up on you personally, obviously from social media and the news in general. I knew about you. And then I discovered the school, and then started reading up and watching the videos and kind of doing a deep dive. Because it's very important to me where my kid has her first experience in school, because of what I went through. I'm not saying my school was bad, but my school was extremely difficult and tough and closed-minded. My second school, my first school was incredible. What I would have liked as a student back then is to have not better advice. That's the wrong word, because you do have advisors in most schools, and they don't necessarily know what they're talking about all the time, but that's the job they have, and it is what it is. What I would have liked is to meet people that are older, entrepreneurs, CEOs, whatever you want to call, that just came in and had a conversation. I only got that in college. It's not too late. It's not too early to do it in school. So in university, this gentleman called Nabil Shartouni, who till today I remember the lecture he did. One of the youngest vice presidents in the history of Hilton. And when Elvis was coming up, he took like 50 menus from a restaurant he worked at, made him sign it because he wanted to sell them. He's like, this guy's going to be a star. This guy intrigued me so much, this character of a person. I'm like, why don't schools have people like you, or even like me, or like Peter, who come in and just have a little chat with students about, like, what are you doing? Like, what's the plan? This would have made me at least feel like whatever I'm doing now, there's a purpose towards it. And what do we have at that age other than a purpose as a student? What's the purpose of your existence? There has to be something. It's not just grades and graduating. But that's what I was fixated on. I was so obsessed with SATs and graduating and getting into a major and going to college that I was missing out on maybe other opportunities I could have had in school, other than doing sports and varsity and drama and music and whatever. So I think I would have liked, at a school level, at least the last couple of years, to have people come in that have an interesting story. Because at the end of the day, I think, at least this is maybe more personal for me, I think inspiration, if you get inspired, it leads you to aspiration. So if you get inspired at 15 or 16, you never know how many 15-year-old entrepreneurs in Dubai are just lurking around, wasting their time, doing nothing. Yeah, maybe and I know you guys have a program here for, to support, the kids that want to come up with. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, no school has that. I mean, you're actually willing to invest with your students. My point is, something like that, like a program for at least, would have been a lot more interesting for me than Oh, I just need to get to college. That became the only objective. What's stopping a bunch of 17 or 18-year-olds in your school today who work on a group project that ends up being some super disruptive technology or business, and they don't really need to go to college for that. They can just go get an online degree and just start a business. How many cases of this do you hear in the US or Europe? A lot. Because the system is geared towards pushing people to experiment. And you can always go to university later. I don't think we have a lot of people here over 40 that go back to school. But it's very normal in the West. Since we're more advanced now than the West, I think as Dubai, obviously, I mean the UAE, obviously, but we're talking about being in Dubai right now. I mean, Sharjah, I think also these days, and Abu Dhabi have taken off dramatically, but we have so many resources that most people around the world don't have. We have so many opportunities most people around the world don't have. You have an entrepreneurial government across the UAE. You have thousands of entrepreneurs and opportunists that have set up businesses. You have so many people you have access to that most countries, most cities would never have access to them. So why not use that industry or that ecosystem that's already here? I can't think of a single business owner in Dubai today that you wouldn't pick up the phone and call and say, hey, we're doing this roundtable once a month, do you want to come and have a chat with the kids about what you do? Who would say no? Everyone would do it.
So we're actually touching at something that you started already.
Okay.
And I think you'll fit amazingly if you'll accept it. Yeah?
Yeah.
So we call it the co-mentoring program.
Okay.
And let me explain what's the idea behind that. 70% of what you have of your journey were failures.
Yeah.
Yes? And I would think that you have stressed a bit about that.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And something that I try to do is to get used to managing failure as early as possible in life. And that if we are able to do that earlier, where learners at the school level get used to the fact that most things fail.
And it's okay.
And it's okay, and you just need to manage your way.
And it's never the end of the world when something fails.
Exactly. Which is, by the way, the opposite of what the education
Traditional system teaches them.
In the last 200 years. Because you are really punished if you make a mistake. You should not make a mistake. Yeah? Whereby, as you probably know, statistically actually, in the last 200 years, 90% of businesses fail within the first 3 years. God knows how many fail afterwards.
Yeah, for sure.
So you are actually, the norm is failure.
Of course.
Success is the remote exception.
Is the exception, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So how is it that you are meant to avoid 90% of what will happen? I think it is better that you get used to how, managing your failures to achieve your successes. So one thing that I wanted to be able to do at the school level is that. And if you are training your learners in an environment whereby you are teams, you are going through a lot of experiences, a lot of them will fail. If they go back home and that work is undone,
yeah,
then you would have not been able to deliver on the objective.
Correct.
So an exercise that we are trying to conduct now, and a program that we've initiated, which is the co-mentoring program, is actually expanding that experience back home. And how is that done? Is by inviting parents, willing parents, into co-mentoring programs with the mentors from our side, and surrounding the kids with actually entrepreneurs that will help them understand the journey of entrepreneurship, and that experience is actually expanded all the way back home. We hope that by doing so, we actually evolve teams.
You will. Okay. You will, naturally.
We are able to get them to understand that failure is
part of it,
and that success is managing failures up until you find your successes. So we hope that works. I definitely would love.
I'd love to. You don't have to
have
ask
you
me
in that
twice.
program.
Yeah.
So that will be amazing. How would you imagine the experience of your daughter's education journey moving forward? How would you love to see it from the perspective of a parent?
Even before discovering Citizens and knowing you guys exist, a couple of years ago when you started, I was always worried about this, which is why when she was born, I started a small fund for her, because I thought, when she's 18, she can decide if she wants to start a business or go to university. Like, for me, university, I don't think our era of universities will be as relevant as they are 15 years from now or 14 years from now. I think it has to be disrupted. It has to change. Again, I'm not talking about specific majors or specific degrees, because, but even those degrees, many of them will cease to exist. I would like her to be in an environment that encourages her to make mistakes, but not be reckless, if that makes any sense. So what ends up happening with kids or adults even who are kept in a glass cage is they end up being reckless because they want to do the extreme opposite of what they were not allowed to do.
It becomes a gamble.
Exactly. So you become addicted to the gamble rather than the opportunity. And I think for her, just seeing her now grow up and ask me, and we would talk about what I do, with work, and she sits with me when I'm on my calls sometimes and asks questions. I keep telling her, I want, ask questions. I want her to ask questions, even if it becomes annoying. Sometimes people don't like to be asked too many questions. I think what I care most about for her is that she is in an environment of curiosity, where it's not only okay to ask why something is or what, it's almost crucial to ask. You shouldn't just take things at face value. Well, because somebody said this, it's the truth. I think we're in an age of, dramatic, accelerated access to information. Ancient technologies are being phased out and becoming obsolete. Things we believed 3 years ago are no longer believable anymore, because they're like, well, this doesn't make sense anymore. So I always say we're in the age of knowing now. So if we're in the age of knowing, meaning we can find answers to almost everything, why are we still questioning things? Why are we still asking, why are we not questioning more things? Especially when it comes to science and technology, right? Even business, even literature, education, even biology. Everything can be questioned now. So I think with her, I care more about her being, encouraged to be curious and not feel like I shouldn't raise my hand and ask a question because maybe it's the wrong question, or it's a stupid question, or it's not the right thing to do. I think that's what is more important for me than what she's learning, because you can set up any subject you want for a student. You can say, okay, you're going to learn, you're going to learn about a specific book in literature. Maybe the student is not interested in Bertolt Brecht, a communist German writer. Like, there's no interest, have no interest. Maybe they want Ernest Hemingway. They're going to go read Ernest Hemingway on their own. So you're not really getting your money's worth in school if your kid is not interested in the subject. So I think what you've done here, from what I see, I think always the biggest indicator of the success of a business is how your customers feel, and your customers are your students. So when I walk around and see them happy and smiling, and they say hello and they high five me, that's a pretty big success. That's very impressive after 3 years? Yeah, it's incredible. So. You reminded me of a parent that I had that was not happy about them being happy. Oh, they didn't like it.
They are so used to.
That's a tough one, man. I don't know what to say.
School has to be tough. It's not a happy place. Yeah. Why not?
I think you get a lot more out of anybody if they enjoy what they're doing, right? Students, employees, board members. It doesn't matter what they do. I think if they're excited to come to school, or excited to go to the office, or happy when they leave, that's it. You've succeeded.
I don't understand when did in humanity the whole idea of work hard and suffer now so that you enjoy
later, when it's too late.
I don't get it. How did that become part of humanity?
I have a theory about that, actually. Look, again, we inherited a lot of archaic ideas about civilization and society. I always say the irony is that civilization and society and science and medicine started here, and then we lost it somehow in the Arab world over the years, but that's a different conversation for a different podcast probably. But if you look at values, like when I say values, I mean social values, I think a lot of those dictate what you're allowed to think or not think. Like, what will people think if you want to do this and not that? What will people think? And I think that's very negative to have that kind of mentality.
I've told you about this novel that I've just
that you're
publishing. It addresses the concept of love.
Okay.
And there are many other concepts that I'm trying to investigate, like the concept of happiness or the concept of success. I think they are very human-made, and I think people are misguided by many of these concepts. And investigating them, I think, will help a lot of people see the reality of things rather than be driven by very imaginary concepts.
Yeah, or commercially, commercial concepts or imaginary concepts.
So this is why the other thing that I care about, beside evolving entrepreneurial teams, is actually helping evolve generations that can gauge their quality of life, which is a big question mark that I'm trying to address. What is quality of life?
Versus standard of living.
What is that? Yeah. So how do you gauge your quality of life? Which, in my opinion, a very basic question, but hardly addressed. This is why I created a whole company now, an organization called The Living Quality, trying to address it scientifically. Because science has done the job.
Yeah.
But we, as the education system, the society,
we ignore the data.
We never really looked at it because this is where
it contradicts the belief system.
This is where it feels sad.
Yeah.
That you are almost like a number in an Excel sheet, whereby the main question about your quality of life is never addressed. It's sad to see that people live a lifetime without even asking that question.
Yeah.
And then how do you gauge your quality of life? And then how do you enhance it for yourself and others? So that's the second thing, an equally important thing that I'm trying to address and see if an education system that actually can help. I wanted to ask about a thought that keeps lingering in my head, and I'm trying to collaborate with the authorities to see how possible could that be, which is I would love to see as many students as possible graduating from this school, or any school per se, with owning shares into companies. And how would that change mindsets? This is a thought, this is a dream that I have, and I want to push towards it. How would you feel about that?
I think that'd be phenomenal. I think.
Would you think it will trigger something in many?
Of course, it's there's extremes to this. Not extremes, but there's two very different ways to look at this, I think. One is from a risk-reward discussion. So you're a student, you're 17, you're about to go to college, and your final year in school, you opened a business. My sister-in-law opened her business. She was 17 here in Dubai. I don't know, 25 years old now. And owning shares in a business, having that fear of, making it work, it changes a couple of things. It's not an innocence issue or no, you're too young for this. I don't think so. I think it's a very interesting proposition to give people that opportunity. If you're 16 or 17 or 15 and you have the mentality of, I want to do my own thing, because a lot of kids now, I'll give you a basic thing, reselling sneakers and building Fortnite profiles and selling them or getting into crypto. A lot of kids are doing this stuff. We never did this when we were 15 or 16. Collected baseball cards, it's not a thing, right? Yeah,
I don't know when in history that you are a kid up until you are 18. I don't understand how that happened.
Because again, that's it, right? They say, when you're 18, you become an adult, but you should be responsible when you're 15. I have friends who have 14 and 15-year-old kids. They're pretty switched on. They know what's going on. They're not oblivious to the world, right? So you have 14, 15-year-old content creators on social media making millions of dollars. What makes them different to others? It's exactly what you said. They have shares. Whether you want to call it a business or an opportunity or a platform, at the end of the day, you're going to commit X amount of hours into this project. You might make money from it. You might get experience from it. It might open doors for you. But yes, imagine graduating high school, going into university, and you own shares in a business that on the weekend you sit with your other partners and you discuss what to do with it. And so, I think it's phenomenal if that's something that's somehow doable, or, I don't know what would stop anyone from doing it, really.
Currently, there's some...
It's an age issue?
It's an age issue. It's a regulation. But then I've brought it up to the authorities. And the good thing is that, this is what you get.
If you can drive now
in
at
Dubai
17,
and UAE, this is what you get. You get open ears. They are like, okay, let's talk about it, which is something. Yeah?
When the government behaves like a business,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to cut through the red tape. So like I said, now the driving age has been brought down to 17.
Yes.
So if you can drive at 17, why can't you own a business?
Exactly.
One actually has a lot more of a profound effect, and in terms of risk, which is driving, versus setting up a company.
Yes.
Yes, rules and laws can change, and they do change very quickly here.
Yes.
Luckily for us, they're always listening, which is good.
Last words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom. Oh wow, I don't know if I have any wisdom in me. This is something I say to a lot of people who call me for advice or just to have a chat, and it's something I've learned again over the last 20 years. Sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way. But nothing is the end of the world. Even when it seems like it's the end of the world, it's not the end of the world. That's the only thing really I feel like is something people need to hear regularly. Is even if it seems like it is, it rarely is. Unless you were dinosaurs, 55 million years ago, then it was the end of the world. But for us now, really, people go through ups and downs. That's never going to change. And like I said, you could be doing great, but not doing great in other things in life that should also matter, like quality of life. You have a horrible quality of life, but you're making a lot of money. What's the point? So yeah, nothing is the end of the world, even when it seems like it is. That would be the last bit of wisdom, if you want to call it.
Just for the ones that would love to follow entrepreneurs like yourself, how can they get in touch with you? How can they follow you online?
I'd say LinkedIn, but I'm not a big fan because I mostly use it for jokes. On Instagram and Twitter, I am Mr. Brightside. I don't know why, but that's my handle. So usually I'm very responsive there.
Okay, fantastic.
I always answer.
Thank you so much, Samer.
Thank you for
Truly
having me.
appreciate it. I truly appreciate the time, sharing your life story and your vision for your family moving forward. And I hope to see you as a commenter.
Of course. I'll be there.
Thank you so much.